And welcome back to the Dave LewAllen Podcast. We feature sports stories, newsmakers, and difference makers in our communities. Happy to have you with us on YouTube or your favorite source for podcasts. And it is my pleasure to welcome today Mark Hollis. You remember him as the former athletic director at Michigan State University for 10 years, but since his retirement from MSU, has been a part of Dan Gilbert's very large team working in the city of Detroit as the COO of Rock Entertainment Group. Mark Hollis joins us today. Mark,
Great
welcome.
to be here, Dave. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk about your current work, former work, and some stories, hopefully, involving both, which we enjoy here in this format. Let's start with something that's been in the news the last little while here. It's the former president, Donald Trump, running for that office again, came to Detroit, was at the Detroit Economic Club, and made some comments that surprised some people, negative comments toward the city of Detroit. He's in Detroit and making negative comments about the city, and then goes to Chicago for the Chicago Economic Club and doubles down on his criticism of Detroit. Now, we should say in your current job, you're about promoting Detroit, Dan Gilbert's many business ventures, the things that he has and his team have brought to Detroit, the initiatives you're involved with. When you first heard those comments, did it surprise you?
The only thing I could come up with is maybe he's watched too many movies and hasn't ridden the streets of Detroit lately, because I think a fair assessment 14 years ago, but not a fair assessment today. Detroit has changed so much, and it's changed not only because of the buildings, but because of the people. There's more energy. I think the grit and the pride is our strength. There are a lot of attractions, great restaurants, great shops, and to make a comment like that, and I get frustrated with some of the movies, even contemporary movies that project Detroit with certain shots of retired buildings and broken down. There's a ways to go. I think we all realize that in Detroit. But to make a negative comment about this city, which I consider to be America's city, having stepped up during wartime, stepped up during the automotive process, and really stepped up as a vibrant city on a waterfront today. It's projected through our music. It's projected through sporting events. I think the NFL draft, if he didn't watch that, maybe he should watch a few clips of that, because this city does shine. Yeah,
and we're going to talk about that and the significance of it and the other events coming to Detroit. But, the residency in the city of Detroit, Detroit is growing for the first time since the 1950s as well. Population is increasing among, some of the other many positives that are happening. And true enough, there are issues still, as there are in any major city. But the progress is undeniable.
No, as you drive downtown every day, you get to see growth, and you get to see homes being built, places where folks can come out of their apartments and have places to shop. And I lived downtown for quite a while, and that was one of the frustrating parts, is you had to leave the city to do your grocery shopping or to go to the market, and that's not the case anymore. Those are the kind of things, again, before Dan moved down 14, 15 years ago, moved Quicken Loans into the heart of the city, you struggled. You went down there to do stories, and you struggled going into the city, and the Super Bowl and the Final Four back then were challenges to project, and that's not the case today. And I think once you have places to live, and once you live there, you have places to shop and go and walk. And I was there living downtown during a transformational time where all that was happening, and I got to see the limitations, I got to see the growth, and I got to see the end result of it being a city that's desirable to live in.
All right, let's talk about Dan Gilbert, about Bedrock, about Rock Entertainment Group, and your role in working with him. You're a Spartan grad. Dan Gilbert is a Spartan grad. You were the athletic director for 10 years there. Dan Gilbert has been very good to Michigan State University. Just tell me about how your relationship has evolved over the years, and when you made the decision to step away at Michigan State, I'm guessing one of the first calls you got was maybe from Dan Gilbert.
Well, there's some great Dan Gilbert stories, and it really goes back. If you go to 2008, the day I took the job, in my acceptance speech, there's probably 15 of Dan, they call them isms, which is kind of our philosophies, that was embedded into my acceptance speech. So my respect for Dan in 2008 was very high as a new athletic director at Michigan State and in the Big Ten. You go through, and I recall, making the final ask for $10 million for the university, and I was sitting on my wave runner holding onto his dock in Lake Charlevoix, and he's like, "You wouldn't leave. I had to give it to you. You wouldn't leave unless I." So we had those fun episodes, and when I stepped away from Michigan State and retired, it was a very challenging time in my life, and I went through a pretty rough patch internally of dealing with the situation that was going on in East Lansing. And I didn't know what I was going to do, frankly. I knew that I had a lot more to give, and I wanted to work, and I searched a few avenues that were totally out of sports. And, I called Dan more for advice than really a role. And he said, "Don't take any job. Don't accept any job. Come down and talk to us." And Jay Farner, another Spartan, was the CEO at the time. And I went down and sat with the two of them, and we talked about, creative vision for Detroit and bringing events to Detroit and creating music and sports and other things. And that was sort of the start of a path that's not so different from being an athletic director. You're still, you're not managing as many people, but you're guiding the type of things as an AD that I loved, and that was creating memories and creating experiences. And I think I excelled at that more than anything as an AD, and I get to continue to do that now in the city of Detroit and a little bit down in Cleveland.
Well, and the impact has been significant. Your efforts, Gilbert, his team, for what has happened. I mean, when we talked in 2021 for a piece on Channel 7, it was like, we want the NFL draft.
Right.
It'll be bigger than the Super Bowl. That's what Detroit needs. Fast forward a few years later, Detroit had the NFL draft, and it was a home run.
It was, and I think as you look, having served on the NCAA basketball committee, I knew what entities like the NFL or the NCAA are looking at in a city. The one thing this city did during that whole time of pursuing the NFL or pursuing the NCAA is we came together. And Mayor Duggan, big part of that. He has no ego. He has an objective of what's best for the city. And you start to complement that with like Claude Molinari and Dave Beach now and Marty Dobeck over at Visit Detroit and the Sports Commission. You take Rod Wood and Kelly Kozel with the Lions, and they came on board, and really they led the charge, and we were all working for them, including the mayor. But the city, and then you take the private side, and when Dan Gilbert gets involved, it's done at the highest level, and he accepts, he doesn't accept anything that's short of just wonderful. And his input, and really, there's guys like Jared Fleischer and Ivy Greener over at Bedrock. Had they not come into the equation, the draft would have looked entirely different. It wouldn't have excelled. And I'm not saying that was the only factor. What I'm saying it's a collaboration of all of those parts that really starts to create success. And the more this city can do it, Tom Izzo was out trying to figure out how to keep his program successful. And you think of him as this Hall of Famer, but he's always looking to improve. So he went out and met with the Golden State Warriors. And the one thing that he learned was having full alignment from the top to the bottom in any organization, whether it's an NBA team, a city trying to elevate itself, a TV studio. If you have alignment from top to bottom, your ability to be successful is so much greater. And I think that's what this city did during the process of not only planning, securing, but also executing the draft.
Yeah, it was spectacular. I mean, the shots of the city with 750,000 people on ABC and ESPN, spectacular. You know, that was seen around the country as well. And the event went off without a hitch. I mean, which is important as well. And you had people coming to Detroit, certainly from all of the drivable NFL cities, but you had people here from all over, football fans, who had a great experience, and that's what you want.
And you being in the TV experience, you can understand that it took everything for it to be successful, right? It looked amazing on TV, but it looked amazing on TV because of the people that came to the city. And it was that combination of, I had people, there's part of the draft that takes place called the Experience, which was down in Hart Plaza. Mm-hmm. That was the most attended experience of any draft that they've had.
So this is throwing footballs and
you're right.
Super Bowl rings on display,
getting
and
bags of
autographs
goodies
with
and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's other places. Went to Vegas, went to Kansas City. Those were kind of docile, quiet places. Not here. It was full. It was vibrant, and then Mother Nature helped us on Sunday to get over the hump with turning off the spigot and let a little sunshine come out. So it was spectacular. Be remiss, you talk about the attitude of Detroit. Really, from the time we started till the time we had not one incident, and Chief White and Chuck Wilson with our team, the security, the planning, everything was just phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, we've got Final Four coming back.
We do
in a couple of years, which is exciting. There are other events as well that have been committed. Another men's regional. The Big Ten Women's Championship will be here in 2028.
Yeah.
What else?
I think first focus on the NCAA. It's the first time since '72 where a Final Four, cities had a Final Four and a regional the following year. So, what that resonates to me is we're doing things the right way. That goes back to the Sports Commission. That goes back to our community supporting these events. It was in Los Angeles. When UCLA was on their run back in the 70s, the last time that happened. The Final Four is going to look a lot different than it did last time it was in town. Last time in town, it was a basketball tournament. It was 4 teams coming together and playing. Now it's much more of a spectacle. There's a large music festival component to it. There's activations that take place. The Final Four really grew up over the last 10 years. A lot of that was during the time that I was on the committee, ending in 17 out in Phoenix. And it's going to be fun to bring, and they've done much more ever since 17. But it's going to be fun to bring that experience into Detroit, and we'll use all pockets of downtown again, like the Final Four did. Oh. The regional, we just came off one. Yep. It was it was one of the most successful regionals, but it was kind of quiet because it was right in the midst of the draft, and it was sort of the forgotten event in town. But it was capacity. Those have turned into mega sports events. I almost equate them to what a Final Four used to be about 10 years ago. It's that same magnitude. Those are going to be big. I think, for us, I think the eyes of the NHL, the eyes of the NBA have opened to. We have arguably one of the best facilities in Little Caesars Arena. They know this city can deliver. And now with the hotels, Dan's opened several hotels already, one in the Book Tower, a new one's coming online in the Hudson. So we're getting the places where people want to sleep. We already have the places where people want to eat. We have the arena, and I think those will be kind of the next thing. Dan would like to get another Super Bowl, but we'll see when that happens.
What is the most important aspect of having these events in Detroit? A little bit of work that I did happily with the Detroit Sports Commission. Our focus on stories leading up to the draft was about, neighborhoods, city residents, benefits, near-term and long-term of having an event like the NFL draft in Detroit. And I know that's kind of the blueprint that they want to follow in terms of how everybody participates and how people in the city benefit, businesses and otherwise.
Yeah, I think it has to be a a partnership that goes both ways. And we talked about the reasons why an entity would want to come here. That's hotels, that's cohesion of the leadership, and that's the support of the community. Then you want to figure out, okay, to have it here, we're shutting down streets. We're doing, it's an annoyance to some. What's the value that comes back? And you're spot on. It's what's the legacy that can be left behind? Whether it's in parks, it's in education, it's in closing the gap on digital equity and making sure that access is there. Those are all the storylines, and Detroit just delivers a great opportunity for someone like the NBA or the NHL to come in and really make a difference in those elements. So it's not just throwing the party, it's having the value back to the community when those events are over.
Well, certainly the NHL with the All-Star game is long overdue.
Long overdue.
1980, I think, when
Right.
Gordie Howe came here
Right.
and had a 10-minute standing ovation. NBA All-Star game, more recent, but still it's been years and years and years. It's like, it's time.
Yeah, it's time for both, and both of them have grown up into pretty spectacular. We had the NBA All-Star Game in Cleveland recently, and the things that you can do in this city with an event like that, the experiences young kids can get, it's very much a hands-on, experiential type event. So, love to see both of those come in. The Sports Commission is always looking. It's great to have a Mike Tirico on the board there who can bring some national perspective into some of these approaches. But they do a great job filling the calendar. I mean, we hear about these big events, but it's things that I think we're the leading bowling out there. BMX bikes, a lot of NCAA events are coming through, which is really good. And those have value because they bring people into the rooms and they spend money and they get to experience and see Detroit and go back and talk about it so that presidential candidates aren't saying negative things about it. So it all works.
Yeah, that's right. Your network, your contacts from your years of experience at Michigan State and the NCAA, the committees and things that you served on, certainly helps Detroit in this effort. Coming up with ideas and securing great events for Detroit. And one of the things that is coolest about your experience, and you talked about, experiences for people. You did the basket bowl at Ford Field,
Right.
Michigan State, in Kentucky, in the configuration that eventually became the Final Four configuration. You did the Cold War on ice at
Right.
Spartan Stadium, Michigan State.
Started that up, yeah.
Outdoors, on the football field, a hockey game. And now you got the Stadium Series in the NHL, and you got all these other things. And you had the basketball game on the aircraft carrier. Which of those, after you made the decision that we were going to try this,
Right.
which of those events, either kept you up nights the most, or as it was maybe approaching, you're saying, boy, I hope this works?
I've got to speak to all of them because they all have a story, but the game on the Carl Vinson was 8 years in the making and many trips to the Pentagon. And you take NCAA, you take the government, you take the military. In general, you're not going to come up with some cohesion, and we did. Did it for the right reason, did it for the men and women that served on that ship, and it was a spectacular event. There wasn't a lot of anxiety because there was so high level, high caliber people that were involved in helping plan that one. The basketball game at Ford Field was done with the intent and had the result of helping the city of Detroit during the time that it was really down. The city needed something to lift it up, and it was like, well, let's just throw the court out and play a game. And if you go back and look at it, it was very archaical on how that setup was. We were basically put risers and chairs, and the NCAA has taken that and built these cantilever and really grew up. That one didn't create a lot of anxiety because of the late Dave Glazier who worked at Ford Field, worked with us, Greg Ianni as well. It was just a basketball setup in a big building. And the Cold War frightened me from the time it started till the time it was over. And, if you can recall, we had the Weather Channel in, and on Wednesday there were whitecaps going across the pond, and the sun was baking down. And we brought in the guru of ice from the NHL, and he was packing ice in the corner. He's like, I don't think we're going to have a game. And miraculously, Friday, coldest day of the year, everything froze. And remember, that was right on the heels of 9/11 too, so you had that element kind of coming in on it as well. All three events, I think they tried to replicate the Carrier the next year 4 or 5 times, and none of them finished. We put a lot of work in. Kevin Pogg and Paul Shager and Greg we didn't just do events. We researched them, and we knew when the game had to be played outdoors next to the sea. Mm-hmm. We knew the moisture. We knew we had to heat the court. So we took all those, did our research, and research helps alleviate some anxiety, but there was a lot of anxiety around the Cold War.
Yeah, I bet.
A lot.
I bet. All right, so 10 years at Michigan State. I mentioned you were a graduate of Michigan State, grew up in Michigan, athletic director for 10 years. After the Larry Nassar and Luana Simon resigns, a couple of days later, you made the decision to step away, even though you had no supervisory role over Nassar, really didn't even know him. But you made a decision to step away, and at the time you said it was, to try to clear the air, to try to help the university.
Create calmness, and nobody was making a move, and there was a lot of management, in my perspective, based on legal, insurance. It got frustrating. I'd never met Larry Nassar. He didn't report to me. In fact, we were supposed to keep our distance from doctors. But that said, I was in a leadership role, and somebody had to step forward and create some calmness. And I don't know if that did or not. I heard from the attorney out in California that was representing all of them, and it's like, you're the one guy that should not have stepped away. But it's when you get into situations that are just horrific, and you see people in pain, you have personalities that can react one way or the other. You can, just bristle up and grind through it. I couldn't do that. It affected me. It affected my health. It affected my mental well-being. And so I guess, some of it was for trying to deliver a little bit of calmness, a little bit of, okay, there's change. Mm-hmm. And part of it was calmness for me. It was, I was in such a bad place just hearing the stories, and
in some ways, even though you're in a position of power, powerless to change things.
Yeah, when one can't be verbally empathetic, can't be, you can't speak out. You can't. I don't want to even use the word defend, because I don't think anybody should be defending anything in that kind of a situation. But you're not able to speak about your department, about yourself, about the people that you're working with, or really, share any compassion. And did anybody have the manual on how to manage an event or an event like that? I'm not, necessarily saying anybody at the university did anything wrong, but for me personally, it was frustrating that I couldn't speak, and it was just a very, very bad time.
You move on, and you have done that now. Better place?
I think so. I'm not the same person I was.
Yeah.
I've changed.
Mm-hmm.
Experiences like that had an impact on so many people, and parents and survivors and people at the university that were left in the wake. And that's one thing you get frustrated hearing is, the AD that retired in the wake of the Larry Nassar. It's that hurts, and it's not what I aspire to. It's not what I condone. It's so against my fiber. So I'm a different person, and I think everybody is that went through that. So you have a couple choices, and I got, advice from people, and I've gone through therapy and challenged mental health pretty aggressively. And finally, I'm just like, okay, I got a lot to give, and I want to make a difference. And just blessed that Dan Gilbert and the crew at Rocket and Rock Entertainment gave me an opportunity to pull up my bootstraps and have a place to land.
They're blessed to have you.
Yeah.
You've been back to campus a couple of times.
I went back for my first football game actually this season in 2024. Last football game I saw there was in 17, so it's been a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was for Mark D'Antonio's recognition for his Hall of Fame.
I went back for the opener, and then I went back again for the Ohio State game. And when you get in situations like that, I suppose you get a bit of bitterness and you get a bit of fear about what's it going to be like. And both of those things diminish, almost immediately when you step on campus. You realize that what you did there is still valued and appreciated, and there are people that love the university, and they love the fact that during my tenure there we made a positive impact. And little regretful that I didn't go back earlier, but you had to go back when the time was right, and the time was right this year.
Well, and you hired Mark D'Antonio, and he's been a good friend over the years, so it was right that you were there to honor him.
Let me tell you a story. So I go back, and I went to golf practice, hockey practice, basketball practice. I did the WJR pregame show, and I'm standing in front of the stadium, and I'm like, do I want to go in or do I want to just go home? And I hear this voice, and he goes, Mark, is that you? And I turn around, and he goes, it's Mark D'Antonio. And he goes, let's walk through the tunnel together. Now, I've walked through that tunnel thousands of times.
Yeah.
First time I ever cried was walking in that first game with him, and the fact that he found me, called my name out, and basically grabbed my hand and walked me through the tunnel together. So that was pretty cool.
Something just right about that.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, everybody knows that Tom Izzo's like best bud, right?
Yeah.
Best man in weddings and things.
He was the best man at my wedding.
Yeah.
Mooch was the best man in his.
The
three of us used to hang out in Carriage Hills Apartments in East Lansing. And, it was he's quite a person.
And still going.
Going.
And with all of the changes, even since you left, as AD at Michigan State, the landscape of college athletics, you couldn't blame a guy like Izzo, if he just wanted to throw up his hands and say, I've had enough, right? But here he is still trying to affect change as well, and still impacting the lives of young players. And let's be honest, that man is the face of the university.
In a way, face of the state. He's the grit that Coach Campbell's brought to the Lions. His dad was a shoe cobbler. Carl up in northern Michigan. He is what he is, and yet he's had so much success that he's brought to the university and brought to the state. And his biggest legacy is when you go back for any practice, there's always former players there. I mean, the guys are always coming back and returning and being part of it. So, he's probably in it this long because he loves name, image, and likeness, and that's such a positive part of college sports. But you've watched a lot of coaches step away.
Yeah.
Coach Wright at Villanova, and Coach K, and Coach Saban.
Yeah.
Some of it, maybe it was their time, but some of it I think was forced by the fact that coaching's not what it was 5 years ago.
Yeah,
it's really changed.
And so let's use that to pivot to the NCAA, and you've had long involvement with the NCAA. But what has happened in that area, name, image, likeness? For years, right, there was complete resistance to pay players or provide stipends or to do this or to do that to make the life easier, right? And so then the momentum with a lawsuit and whatnot, right, builds, and the NCAA just kind of throws up their hands and says, whatever you want to do, just go do it, right? I mean...
Well, they did that with a little help from the courts, but
well, right. That's what I say, a lawsuit and what.
Yeah.
But still, it's and now what do we have? We have a wild, wild west, don't we?
Yeah, you go back to what, one of the plans. I actually was on Vice on HBO talking about. We welcomed them into the program, and they got into it pretty deep. But was a plan to give student athletes money by the year, and at the end of their tenure, if they graduate, I put the graduate caveat on it, they could have, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to start their life. That was refuted. Like when I made those statements, the attorneys at the NCAA, the attorneys at the Big Ten were a little upset with me of how could you even cross that line. Well, today they're like, wow, we should have looked at an approach like that. I don't know where it's going to go. An assistant football coach at LSU made $2 million, and that was the trigger for me of this isn't college sports that I signed up for.
Right.
College sports has always been about money. You can go back to the Duffy Doherty times. It's escalated so high that now you have to start to look at the value for each of the components. So you look at the schools, the campuses, the communities. Is it good or bad for them? Is it good or bad for the student athlete? Is it good or bad for the fan or the alumni that's attending? And now you're getting games where television is paying the money. Television's dictating the time. Sometimes, again, you don't know if it's noon or 7 a week before the game. All these elements are coming in, and with the student athlete, the ability to jump and move around. I've talked to athletes that have been out for 10 years, and they're concerned on the impact it's going to have because it's a short way of solving a problem.
Transfer portal, you got kids that have been at 3 schools, in 3 years.
I think 3 of the quarterbacks in last year's college football playoff, 3 of them were at a different school the year before. Yeah. And I do think once the money starts to flow and once you start paying coaches what they're being paid and developing staffs as big as they are, the reason I thought about it before is the student athlete is part of the equation, and you either got to bring it back, which I don't think you can put it back in the bottle now,
right.
Or you got to figure out where is this going to go. And I think eventually it's going to be a W-2 versus a 1099 situation. I think they'll become
employees.
An employee of the school. And for me, I would feel better about that as a fan and alumnus than I would be about these just arbitrary checks being written by different companies to students. I'd feel better that it's no different than if you're an employee at jazz students are getting paid to do jazz performances. It's a bigger level, I get it. Yeah. But there are other students on campus that are getting paid for what they do. And
that there are schools that aren't going to be able to compete.
Right.
Even the bigger schools, if it's not, Michigan and Ohio State and Alabama and LSU and, hopefully, Michigan State. You're never going to win anything. You're never going to be able to compete, right? If the money is, and it was difficult before, now it's going to be darn near impossible, isn't it?
Separation is a destructive animal.
Yeah.
We're seeing it on the PGA Tour. You're seeing it, when you think about it in college sports, you start with the conferences, and you're seeing the separation of conferences, right? There's going to be the SEC and the Big Ten when it's all said and done. Yeah. And everybody else is going to have to figure out, what are we? Well, then you go within those conferences, and within the Big Ten, you've got the Ohio States and the Michigans, and then you've got the Northwesterns and the Rutgers. So there's that separation is growing. Then you go within the Michigan athletic program. Yeah. There's separation of the teams. There's going to be the teams that are getting NIL or getting paid, right? And then there's going to be the teams that aren't. Then you go within the football team, and there's going to be guys that are getting it and guys that aren't. This separation equation that's evolving due to name, image, and likeness is one that's going to be potentially very destructive to the college game.
Well, and now you even see Ward Manuel at Michigan saying we're going to have to do
signage and advertising
in the stadium and all these other things because we need more money.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. You need more money at the University of Michigan in the athletic department? Doesn't that speak to exactly where we're at? In terms of that race to, to wherever? Yeah.
Ohio State's chasing the SEC. Michigan's chasing Ohio State. it's a game where you want to keep that gap as tight as you can so you can be competitive. That frankly, I give credit to all of the coaches at Michigan State, because we weren't competitive financially, but we were competitive on the field and the court. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to the alignment thing we talked at the top of the show about, is we made sure our coaches understood, like Tom Izzo understood what the track coach was going through. And the track coach could appreciate Izzo a little more because of the challenges. And if you have that alignment, it comes back to closing those gaps. And the tighter you can keep them, the more successful you can be.
So you can look back at the Michigan State, tenure with some really good memories.
We were 8-2 against Michigan. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Well, it's important that you point that out, and congratulations on that for sure. How are you against Central Michigan, by the way?
Oh, I can't remember that one. Nice call.
My school. But so you can look back fondly on the experiences and the memories created there. But on the other hand, maybe you're saying, I'm not sad that that's in the rearview mirror, right? Given where things are at today with college athletics.
You might think that, but I am. I miss the people that
Sure.
are in college sports, and frequently hop on the horn with them and, provide some free counsel or free advice. And sports has changed. You had the racial divide in the 60s. You had gender equity in the 70s. This is another experience that college sports is going through. It's always proven to be a leader in correcting some of these. And I think what's happening in college sports, you're seeing in the real world too. You're seeing in businesses trying to retain talent, attract talent.
While at the same time downsizing
Right.
or having technology take a bigger role.
Right. So there's change going on everywhere. Yeah. And I have highest confidence that the men and women that are in leadership roles right now are, once there's an understanding, the courts have taken an approach that I respect, but it's forcing change. Oh. And now there has to be a response where folks step up. Is that going to be the NCAA? Is that going to be the Big Ten and the SEC? Is that going to be all the schools together? I don't know. But somebody's going to have to step up and say, this is the future of college sports, and we're going to do it in the best interests of the students, the fans, and the communities where all these colleges are located.
Mark Hollis, our guest on the Dave LewAllen Podcast. He also has a radio show on WJR Sunday mornings, JR Sundays, with Mark Hollis. And that's one of the duties, I guess, as we wrap things up today. A little bit more maybe about your role, whether it be day to day or just the big picture stuff, and the initiatives that maybe that you can share with us that you're working on or that you'd like to see in addition to the All-Star games that we touched on.
Well, the big thing Dan brought me down for was the PGA Tour and the Rocket Mortgage Classic, and we've been working on that since 2018. And we just had some turnover. Jason Langwell did a great job leading that. He and Rob Kroll have departed. So I'm heavily, that's taking the 10 hours a day right now of making sure this. And if you look at that event, that truly was the start of the next round of great sports events in Detroit. We had that back around 2000, and now you've got the next version of it. I argue that the Rocket Mortgage Classic and then Bud Denker and Michael Montry and Roger Penske moving the Grand Prix back to the streets of downtown, those two events open the eyes. And they're the reason why everything else is happening. They're the examples that we had. So it's taking a position of never take anyone or anything for granted. It's making sure that you don't, Izzo loves the term don't get fat and sassy. Keep making sure you're elevating everything that you do. And that's done through collaboration with others, constant communication with Claude Molinari and Dave Beach now, and making sure that whatever vision we put out there is aligned with what theirs is and how we can do it. So 27 is going to be a big year. Yeah. It's not too far away.
No.
28 is going to have, as you mentioned, the Big Ten women's and the basketball tournament and the regional. And, I'm getting up there in years, so I'm going to start to hopefully start to enjoy versus execute, some of these as we go forward.
Well,
but,
you've got more to give.
It's being around you, and it's been many, many years. I love television. I've admired you as a sportscaster, and then sitting in the big chair as the anchor. And
well, I appreciate
your approach to the city is one we're all blessed to have you here.
Well, this is home, and have never wanted to leave, and want everyone to do well, as we move forward. And it's so heartening to see, as you mentioned, the cooperation between all of the entities necessary to make events like the NFL Draft and Final Four, to make them as successful as they can be. And fortunately, at this moment in Detroit, we have that, and let's hope that we can hold on to it.
Yeah, we will. We will for sure.
Yeah, Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Hollis, the COO, Rock Entertainment Group, joining us on the Dave LewAllen Podcast. We're here for newsmakers, sports stories like today, and difference makers as well. We appreciate you joining us, and until next time, be safe.